Lea is going to talk about the portrayal of domestic and sexual abuse change across performances of Tennessee Williams' A Streetcar Named Desire. Thank you, Lea.
Hello, my name's Lea. I'm a third-year fine arts student, and I'm going to be talking about sexual abuse and domestic violence, so I thought I'd just put a disclaimer up if anyone is uncomfortable listening to those sort of topics. This is the essay that I had written for my visual culture module this year, and it is a conversation between 4 iterations of A Streetcar Named Desire. Starting with the original 1947 screenplay, going between 2 film adaptations in the 50s, and concluding with a Young Vic performance in 2014. It explores the evolution of gender dynamics, socio-political backgrounds, censorship, and female empowerment over the decades of media and entertainment. I focused on 3 main critical theorists using Laura Mulvey's Visual Pleasure and the Narrative Cinema, written in 1975, Catherine McKinnon's Sexual Pornography and Method, Pleasure Under Patriarchy in 1989, and Julia Kristeva's Power of Horror, and an essay on abjection in 1941. Beginning with the original 1947 screenplay, Tennessee Williams had wrote this in reference to post-World War II America with the Old South versus the industrial New South. It has lots of themes of dichotomy with promiscuity versus assertion, and specifically in the scene 10, which I focused on throughout my essay, being the sexual assault scene, we see a lot of scenes of duality, especially in the descriptive language used, using inert as a word to describe Blanche, the suppressed and abused, and animalistic terms such as leaping to describe Stanley, our abuser. Something I found really interesting about this screenplay is that the original reception for the audience was that they would applaud. They would applaud at a rape scene, at the downfall of a woman, and I found this to be horrific from a point of view of modern day culture. I think this is influenced by some of the biblical references that are made throughout the original screenplay. Stanley states that not once did you pull any wool over this boy's eyes. This is reference to an original biblical quote from Matthew 7:15, claiming, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves." This presents as presented innocence and contained evil, therefore showing that actually we were presented as a woman who was evil, being dominated by a man who was reclaiming his power. However, later on, we see a reaction to this assault, with Blanche bathing herself, washing away the trauma that was created in the previous scene. Moving on to the 1951 film adaptation by Elia Kazan, we are introduced to a more visual performance with the Hays Motion Picture Production Code, creating a moral guideline of what could be presented on a screen. This was guided by Catholic belief, so contained no nudity, swearing, childbirth, pregnancy, disease. It very much suppressed the icon of female reproduction and the freedom of speech. Elia Khan had actually breached the boundaries of this time, breaking one of the main rules of the Hays Production Code, which was, "No picture shall be produced which will lower the moral standards of those who see it. Hence the sympathy of the audience shall never be thrown to the side of the crime, wrongdoing, evil, or sin." By breaching this, it shows that Blanche had not been seen as the victim in this situation. She was seen as the villain. However, Marlon Brando, who played the role of the heartthrob, plays an abuser, yet gained female adoration from the public and society that it was presented to. Stella, Blanche's sister, states that there are things that happen between a man and a woman in the dark that sort of makes everything seem unimportant. This objectification of power from a man becoming the only thing that is strived for by a woman shows that female desire is only based on this claim for power. I also wanted to talk about how the 7 deadly sins are provided in this production, which also references back to the biblical references. He wants to protect his family from a woman, the original sin, pride. He also wants to show lustful desire towards his sister, his wife and her sister, which is showing intense sinful lust. However, also at the end, when he is punishing her through this sexual desire, it shows wrath. Throughout the entire film, we are shown pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, sloth. We are shown every aspect of the 7 deadly sins, showing that not only female desire is shunned upon at this point, but also showing that the male interactions have also embedded a sense of sin throughout the entire play. I also wanted to reflect on, literally, mirrors, how once the abuse scene has happened, she is thrown against a mirror. You can see that she is unconscious in this, and it is in a reflective nature, a person's soul. She has a shattered spirit. There was an active male and a passive female, and this fatal flaw of promiscuity has become her bitter downfall. Moving on to 1995, so only a couple years later, we are shown a drastic shift in censorship with Glenn Jordan's film adaptation. In the same year, the Supreme Court enforced that directors and producers were entitled to their rights for free speech and entitled to their rights of free political display under their First Amendment. It presents a more brutally psychological and demanding presentation of the sexual assault, and it moves much more away from those romanticized tropes that we see in the first 2 presentations. We see cinematography used to create spinning shots, to create a disorientated atmosphere, and close zoomed shots to create a trapped sense of connection to Blanche. It helps us to understand the fear of the traumatic relationships, but also to show that we are on the perspective of the damsel in distress, being attacked by this beast. I found it interesting that Jessica Lange was the actress of choice, as in her earlier roles, she was in King Kong, where again, she played the damsel in distress. It almost relates directly to this, where Blanche is our female protagonist, and Stanley is the beast that attacks her. The part of this film that I found was the most harrowing was indeed this scene 10, where we see an explicit lack of consent. Blanche is screaming no, kicking and punching, and she is picked up, span around, and pinned down with extreme bodily force used to submit her. In the entire scene, we see that the male dominance is the suppressor for our lead female character, presenting a representation that male dominance is the only suppressor for the independent female power. Moving on to 2014, we were displayed with the Young Vic play directed by Benedict Andrews. Benedict Andrews displays a blurred line between the world of happiness and reality that Blanche is exploring. She's intoxicated, she has smeared makeup all over her face, and she is slurring every word she speaks. This shows that when Stanley goes into the sexual assault scene, he is taking advantage of a young woman in clear distress, which I thought related heavily to issues of today, with date rape affecting 13 to 27% among college-age women and 20% to a high 68% among adolescents, which was registered in 1998. I found a quote that stated that raped women are seen as asking for it. If a man wanted her, she must have wanted him, which I think is specifically in this scene shown when Stanley decides for Blanche that this is her fate, rather than her having a conversation. I think this creates conversations of female freedom and sexual liberation without consequence. He goes on to animalistically attack Blanche, covering her face with a dress, questions whether she's preserving her beauty and youth. In comparison to a previous scene, she covers a light bulb with a paper lantern to preserve her own beauty, or whether this is the pacification of female power. It dehumanizes her, and it creates a lack of self-dignification. But then also, is this Stanley's self-dignification? Is he the voyeur to the situation, as he animalistically digs through her dress, showing his primal nature and animalistic hunger? This is a clear depiction of the battle between patriarchal power and feminist freedom. However, the battle is always won before the fight has even begun. I wanted to take some time to explore how this is relevant to today's society. An alarming 1 in 3, 30% of women are subject to assault or be assaulted at least once in their life. This was a statistic from 2022. Convicted rapists will only serve 2/3 of their time, and this was a statistic from 2023. This is prior to only serving half their time in 2020. This injustice was my driving force for the exploration. And I found this to be something that is still being talked about to this day, as there is a recent trend in women comparing their fear of a man to preferring meeting a bear in the woods. This has been joked about, and it is almost using a woman's voice as comedic effect. How much has really changed if a woman genuinely would find more predictability in a wild bear than the threat of a man in an unknown circumstance? We need to grow and advocate for the education of domestic and sexual abuse in society and strive to educate women on safety and men on the importance of consent, creating a future of freedom and safety for the women and girls of our future. And as the final person on the panel, I would like to ask, is there any questions? Thank you.